In this presentation, we'll share a little more about what an integration platform for mental health services might look like. First, we'll cover some of the issues. First, we need to make sure that we have good data security and privacy. We want to make sure health information is protected. There are laws around that, but it's also a best practice to embed privacy into our design. We want to make sure that any information that is necessary goes where it's needed, but anything that's not needed doesn't go to people who don't need that information. Secondly, there are robust needs for different users. So individuals who are seeking mental health care may need to search for providers. They may need to find out how many sessions their insurance covers. They may want to see provider ratings. They may need to pay bills or communicate with insurance or with their provider. Providers may need to market services to their clients, track sessions for insurance, code those sessions with those various codes that we know they need to put in there. They may need to update their availability, keep notes, send messages, set fees for private pay clients because not everyone has insurance that covers sessions. Not all providers take insurance. They need to manage contracts with their insurers, pay employees, and do a lot of different things in their own system. Insurers similarly need to manage contracts with providers, set codes, manage billing, both with the providers and with individuals. They may need to track their finances. Policy regulators may need to have their own systems in order to talk to insurers and providers and make sure everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. We know that there's a lot of data out there, so particularly for insurers, they're collecting a lot of information, and that could be used and analyzed in a way that may be helpful for everyone, but they need to make sure that that data is also handled appropriately with the appropriate levels of security and privacy, especially now that there are AI tools to help with analytics for big data. We need to make sure that that data is being handled properly. And then there are disruptors. So there are new telehealth companies and all kinds of other mental health services that have their own needs and their own platforms. So we're looking at a lot of different types of platforms. Here we're just going to look at an example of some of the issues when you have three different services. So one, you may have a website for an insurer, you may have a website for a provider of mental health services, and you may have an aggregator website like Psychology Today where people can go and look for mental health providers. So we're just going to take a single example. We're going to say, what if there was some kind of a filter on services offered? So let's say this is information that's being shared between a provider and an aggregator. So let's say a therapist is going to provide information about the services offered to a website like Psychology Today. Now, Psychology Today may have their own categories. They may have psychotherapy, couples counseling, and trauma therapy, those kinds of things, and the provider needs to select which of these they offer. So that might be information that the provider provides to the aggregator, which is different maybe than what they might provide directly to an insurer. So for an insurer, they may be asking that the provider selects from these types of categories. They may have a specific code. The code A1B1C1, individual therapy, affective disorder, 8 sessions, A2B2C2, therapy with another, etc. So they may have different ways that they code the same information between these two different websites, depending on whatever they are providing, whatever is being asked. So ideally, we would have one system, one code of information that can be shared between all of these. So we need to have a standard set of terminology, an international set of standards that's used between all of these different sites that everyone agrees on. And if we can do that, then maybe there would be one list, and maybe it would be at the most detailed level. So maybe it would have code A1B1C1, etc., with all of that different information. And that information would live in a silo somewhere in a data warehouse. Then once we select something, so let's say we go ahead and select this first code, then that information might look a little different and the display might be different in each of those systems. So this code may display for the insurer as code A1B1C1. It may display for the provider as individual therapy. It may display for the aggregator as psychotherapy, depending on their different needs. But at the base level in the data warehouse, it would all go back to being the same code, the same piece of information. And that will allow everyone to use the same standards and communicate effectively across all of the teams and get information in a really nice way. So if we imagine that everyone has a platform that's using these standards, instead of the provider having to go to 2 different places, record their information differently, adding a lot of gaps there, room for error, a burdensome process on everyone, information not being standardized. If a client goes to an aggregator website like Psychology Today and they find psychotherapy, that doesn't mean that's how their insurer is coding it. All of those different things that we know that make things difficult throughout the process. Ideally, if we have one integrated platform that we can use as a service, then we would be able to do this more effectively. And there are companies that are doing this now, so this is not something where we have to start from scratch. I wanted to take a look at a couple of those. The first would be IBM. IBM has their own insurance industry reference architecture. They have a nice diagram here. I'm not going to go through all of it, but where they have considered how they silo information and how that information moves through the different systems based on the different users, different personas, and what they might need. So you can see here they have codes for the different people and what types of information they might need, how data gets encrypted, how data is kept secure, and this is something that they offer specifically for insurers. Now, IBM is specifically contracting insurers for this. This is not something that's being widely used across all of the different platforms, and I think that's an opportunity that we could have, is using something like this that everyone accesses together. There's another example from McKinsey, who's a major leader in standards as well, and they have, here, their own little diagram of what this might look like in terms of target architecture for health data. So similarly, making sure that things are siloed and the right information gets to the right place, but that everyone shares the same standards. This is something that's not just being done in health. This is something that is done in other industries as well. So you may be familiar with Plaid and the types of ways that they encrypt data for financial companies, financial organizations. I'm just scrolling through this here. It's just a website, but they have their own standards. They, adhere to ISO standards and use the AES encrypting technology. You can see advanced encryption standards, and they do that now, and a lot of companies use that now. In education technology, there's also learning tool interoperability, LTI standards, and that works very similarly to make sure that education data is protected, and yet learners still get to interact with online activities and other things within a learning management system or without. So there are standards there as well, and that's something that could be a model for health. And that's pretty much it. So those are kind of some of the things that can be done, and we would look forward to having a new integration platform that supports an aggregator website to do all of this. Thank you.